Okay, Dad, repeat that if you will.
What? Okay.
Well, the B-29 was a horrible plane at first when it came out. It had a lot of faults and glitches in it. And they finally worked them out, but they're still, it's a wonderful plane because it can go higher than the pursuit plane can get up to them.
Right.
And, but they had a lot of faults, and so many of them were lost on takeoffs or kind of landing, or like I've heard Otis's crash dive in the Pacific and was never found.
Interesting. You heard, that's the story you heard.
That's what it's from my sister. Well,
And yet from your cousin, I mean, she was a cousin to both of you.
Yeah, Patsy Coffey. Well, her married name Coffey, but Patsy Perriman.
Is her maiden name.
Maiden name.
And is she young, is she closer to you in age, Jess?
She's a little older than I was.
But certainly much
And
younger.
I went to visit her about 2 years ago
Okay.
down near Ada. And we spent the afternoon together. That's when she drove out to the cemetery and showed me the
That's
tombstone that she had erected for her brother.
fascinating. So his plane was lost in a storm,
Yes.
and not, obviously he was part of the war effort, but
Oh, yes. He flew several missions. He was captain.
yeah.
I mean, lieutenant. And he was the pilot. I'd heard navigator, I heard gunner, and then Patsy said no, he was the pilot of the
that's
B-29.
interesting because very few B-29s were used in the European theater.
Well, that's why we're doing this, because it's, I think it's fascinating the histories, even within families, and how
That's right.
they can be 100%. Or
Well, Dad, when Aunt Thelma married this Indian, he drank a lot. Without the alcohol, he was, as far as Mother told me, he was a great guy.
Good man.
Good-looking Indian man. But the drink really got him, and he would physically abuse Aunt Thelma. And Aunt Pearl, her husband's, their last name was Lawrence. And what was Uncle Lawrence's first name?
You know, I was just trying to ask you. I can't remember.
So Aunt Pearl and Uncle Lawrence, he was a dynamite monkey for the Ideal Cement Company there in Ada. He would blast, set the charges to get the rock, and they had these automated big, looks like on railroad tracks, about the size of it, bigger than a dumpster, that they'd put the rock in and it would be shuttled into the Ideal Cement Company to be crushed and made into cement. And Daddy gave Aunt Pearl and Uncle Lawrence and Aunt Pearl were super people,
Was it?
hard work.
I thought it was Lawrence Walker.
Lawrence Walker. Yes, they lived in a town called Lawrence, which outside of Ada, small. It was a company. They had a company store. They had company housing. And what I remember most about going down, Mother would go down to visit Aunt Pearl and bring her things, underwear, bra, dresses, and Dad gave them a car. Their car had quit, and Dad just gave him a car, went and bought another. And he's very kind to Aunt Thelma, and Aunt Thelma and Aunt Pearl would come to Conowall, and they'd set up upstairs a big quilting frame and quilt. They would turn out lots of quilts, and they would help Mother cook, and
Well,
she'd go down and do the same
Tell
thing.
Mother can too, man.
And, oh yes, can.
we're not talking ball jars, we're talking canning.
Canning, yeah, with a jar.
Oh, with the jars, okay.
Yeah, put it in the pressure cooker,
Yeah.
and we didn't start going up and down, the thing could have blown us to
What
smithereens.
was it pickle relish that was so good they made?
Oh, everything's good. And then let me tell you about Mother's side. They were poor.
Dirt.
They were poor. Yes. And he helped Aunt Thelma the same way as much as he could. But Thelma's husband finally passed away of thyroid, liver. And it was more, sad to say, it's more of a relief. And so they have all the Indian allotments that helped Aunt Thelma and also helps Patsy to this day. Because they're Chickasaw tribe down in
Because
that area.
she's half Chickasaw then.
Yes. And because Thelma's husband, Perryman, was full blood. He was a full blood Chickasaw.
Wow.
And so I had fond memories of Aunt Thelma and Aunt Pearl. And Uncle Lawrence, he could play the fiddle. Oh, he was good at it. And he'd come home, I remember being there, and he would come walk from where he worked to the house and have a sandwich, something to drink, and he'd go sit in a chair like this and sleep 15 minutes. And then he'd wake up, go back to work. But I remember, how can a person do that for 15 minutes and then just wake up and go back to work? And so I'm still in contact with Betty Jo Walker. I forget her. She lost her husband and she remarried.
Is it Selby or Gelby or something?
Yeah, something like that. But she lives about 75 miles from me.
She's 94, I think.
Yes, and Betty Jo in great shape. She just recently had a little blood pressure problem. But anyway, that's all I remember from Mother's past.
I'm curious.
Aunt Pearl had 3 daughters.
Yes.
Dorothy, Laura, and Betty Jo.
Yeah.
Betty Jo was the oldest.
Yeah.
So, Dad, if you could summarize one thing in particular that you are most thankful for for grandmom and granddad for, what would that be?
They had a great deal of tolerance. They didn't influence any of us what wanted us to do or anything. A lot of doctors think their sons should be doctors. But I remember Mother and Dad were and that they agreed to put us through college if we stayed within the state. And, but they were very tolerant, and I never heard them arguing. I'm sure they had a lot of discussion because Mother was very strong-willed. But I never, did you ever hear them arguing?
Never heard Mother, Dad say a cross word. I never heard any of them use the colorful language.
Well, Dadgummit was Dad's worst expletive.
Yeah. Betty Jo was telling me last time I talked, we was talking about this, she said, well, when I'd say snot, I'd get in trouble. But anyway, that is so true, because Mother told me, she said, Jay, I don't care what you become, even if you become a ditch digger, I want you to have that tenacity to make it the straightest, the neatest that you can. Do the best that you can at whatever you do. But like Gene said, they never influenced us to be this or that, or I desire you to be
They always
this.
had a united front.
And I, earlier was talking about, I asked Mother one time, I said, what is the secret to your longevity in marriage? And she said, respect, just respect. And I said, in what way? So, same thing. I respected Gene for what he did for making a living. He respected me for keeping the household going and the children going. And let me tell you a funny anecdote on Dad. I was about 10 or 11. And knock on the door. Dad was famous. Anybody knock on the door, come on in, without even seeing him. And mother would get aggravated. Gene, you don't know who. You might let Jack the Ripper in there. So this fella came in. He was a college student selling books. And I was sitting on a hassock. Dad was sitting there and the fella was sitting here and he was going through his spiel. And Dad, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, you know, he kept going with the guy instead of, oh, I don't care. And then he said, the guy said, what do you think? He said, well, I don't think I need any of those. And the fellow looked at me and said, well, maybe the young man would like something to read. I said, oh, the child hadn't learned to read yet. My mouth dropped. That's sort of the humor he had, you know. And like I was wanting a motor scooter so bad when I was 15. Man, I could taste it. And this fellow was selling his all-state scooter. He let me drive it to the house, and I was telling Dad and Dad said, man, you know how many miles per gallon I could go this? Yeah, you sure? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Man, I thought I had him. And I said, Dad, what do you think? He said, no, Jay. He said, I'd rather turn you loose with a car. And I said, why? I wanted, Dad. He said, I love you too much. To me, at that point in time, it did not that blew my mind. I said, I want it. He knows I want it. He wants to make me happy. All he had to do is say yes. But he said, I love you too much to get you a scooter. But later in the year, you know, like they say, the older you get, the smarter your parents become. And then it dawned on me. And then I was telling you about hauling hay. And Dad had promised he'd go half with me on a car after I took driver's ed and everything. So I had saved up for 3 summers, dollar bills, 5s, 10s. I had a stack that I would put in the drawer, saving all these 2 years. And I had $600. I mean $300. And so we went to Seminole at Dad's